Good afternoon to all of you. We are going ahead with lecture 3 for the course ETC 779. Just to start, what I will do just in the beginning, I will try to recapitulate whatever we have covered in the previous lecture. So, if you remember, we had covered the basic principles of time value of money, that was one thing. Then we discussed different scenarios in which we do not require the time value of money concept. We also discussed different evaluation methods in which time value of money is not considered. For example, we discussed 3 methods. First of all, we discussed payback period method, then we discussed out of pocket commitment, and third one we discussed was average rate of return, average annual rate of return. So, these 3 methods are used for situations which do not require time value of money to be considered. That was one thing that we discussed, and then towards the end of the lecture we discussed about the concept of interest. We reviewed the concept of simple interest, we reviewed the concept of compound interest, and then we introduced you to the nomenclature of nominal interest and then effective interest. So, depending on the compounding period, effective rate of interest could vary and it could be substantial difference from the nominal rate of interest. The nominal rate of interest we represented by I nominal, and the effective rate of interest was defined by I effective. I gave you an expression relating effective interest rate with nominal interest rate depending on the period of compounding. Compounding period could be monthly, bi-monthly, quarterly, 6 monthly, or it could be as simple as annual. The compounding could be on a daily basis also, or it could be on a weekly basis also. So, depending on the value of M, if you remember the expression of I effective, I will just open it for you. If you just go back to the expression that I told you in the first class, I mean in the second class. Yes, this is the expression I gave it to you. In this, I nominal is nominal interest rate, I effective is effective interest rate, M is the period of compounding, right. So, for a value of M equal to 4, we found that corresponding to 8% nominal interest, we were getting a effective interest rate of 8.24%, right. So, this is the point at which we close the last lecture. Now, I will just try to tell you what we are going to cover in this particular lecture. We will be focusing mainly on cash flow in this particular lecture, right. So, I will just take you to the cash flow. Now, you must be aware of the fact that any organization who is into business is involved in some kind of cash transaction on a daily basis, right. So, the companies may be receiving some cash from someone, or else they may be paying some cash to somebody, right. So, these are called transactions. Now, transactions could be in terms of cash, it could be in terms of credit also, right. So, no matter what kind of organization we are dealing with, you will find that everybody deals with different kinds of cash flow. It could be incoming, it could be outgoing. Incoming means whatever money or whatever cash you are receiving, outgoing means whatever cash or whatever money is going out of the pocket of the organization. So, we distinguish 2 terms, one is called incoming, another one is called outgoing, right. Now, we define cash flow diagram like this. It is nothing but a visual representation of all the cash inflows and all the cash outflows undertaken in a particular period by the organization, right. So, what it is doing, whatever cash is incoming, whatever cash is outgoing, we are just trying to show them on a diagram. That diagram itself is known as cash flow diagram. Basically, we are plotting this on xy axis, and it is drawn in such a way that whatever cash is transacted, it is clear to the interpreter or the person who is looking at the cash flow diagram. Now, you will also realize the fact that in real life situation, cash flow normally does not follow any pattern, set pattern, that okay, this money I am going to get it this day, this money I am going to get on this particular day, right, because they happen randomly in a given period of time, right. However, if you try to incorporate these things into your model, you will find that we are into big problem. So, in order to simplify these calculations, in order to simplify these transactions which are taking place on a random basis, we are assuming certain things, right. Now, what are those assumptions? The assumptions are that cash transactions are occurring either at the beginning of a period or at the end of a particular period. So, that is assumption number 1. Cash flows are occurring either at the beginning of a period or at the end of a particular period. Say for example, you are receiving certain money on 16th of July. You are receiving certain amount of money, let us say X, on maybe 25th of July, right. So, these two monies you are receiving on two particular dates. Now, if your period of consideration is month, then all these transactions would be assumed to be occurring at the end of the month. Maybe it could be on 31st of July, or else it could be assumed at the beginning of the month, maybe on 1st of July, right. So, the basic assumptions that we are going to employ in this cash flow diagram is, we are assuming that all the cash flows, whether it is inflows or outflows, are occurring either at the end of a particular period or at the beginning of a particular period. Now, period could be week, the period could be day, it could be month, it could be quarter, or it could be an year, right. This particular thing I will be able to explain you with the help of a simple example, and then it will be more clear to you. Now, a typical cash flow diagram, if you see this on your slide, you will understand that it consists of two parts, the top one and the bottom one. By convention, we assume that all the incomings, that is whatever money we are going to receive, are written on the plus side, that is on the upper part of the diagram, whereas whatever money is being taken out of our pocket or whatever money is outgoing, that we show in downward direction, right. This is the fundamental thing. You can change this convention also, but whatever convention you adopt, it has to be consistently followed throughout your problem. You can very well take positive outcomings in downward direction and negative outgoings in upward direction, but you have to stick to this convention throughout your problem. You should not mix. So, whatever assumption or whatever convention you follow, it has to be thoroughly consistent. That is the basic idea. Now, you can also notice few things here in the slide itself. We have time t is equal to 0. If you look at the slide, please, we have time t is equal to 0, then t is equal to 1, 2, 3 and so on. It could be for n periods. Now, here the periods could be either in month, it could be in week, it could be in day, it could be in quarter, it could be in 6 monthly, or it could be even an year, right. Now, whatever money you are transacting right now, you show it at time t is equal to 0. This is representing now, right. Suppose I am going to receive $500 now. So, I am going to receive it. So, how will I show it on the cash flow diagram? Suppose I am going to receive $500 now. So, this is, let us say, time t is equal to 0. Since I am going to receive it, so I will show it in plus side. So, here it is $500. This is time t is equal to 0. Suppose at the same time, right now itself, I have to pay $100 to someone. So, this $100 is going out of my pocket. So, I will immediately show it on negative side, $100. Suppose after 7 days, I have to pay $200 to someone. So, let us say this is after 1 week, I am paying $200 to some agency. So, I will show it like this, right. Now, you must have noticed one more thing. I have put a smaller line for $100 and I have put a slightly bigger line for $200. This is just to show you that this $200 is more than $100. But you should not be too much focused on scale part, right, but you should not try to neglect this also, right. So, we are not going to exactly measure it on a scale, neither we are going to make $100 like this and $200 like this. It is not giving me the correct picture because $200 is double the amount of $100. So, naturally its size also should be proportionately increased, but this is just based on your judgment, right. You should not do it on a scale, right. Suppose in week 2, I am paying $250 to someone. So, I will show it like this, $250. This is axis x and this is your y axis, right. So, this is the basic philosophy behind cash flow diagram. Whatever money you are paying or you are receiving is to be shown on a line diagram, right. Now, another thing about this cash flow diagram which I mentioned to you just a while ago was that whatever period you assume, it could be monthly, it could be quarterly, it could be 6 monthly, and in between the period, suppose you are going through some transactions, those transactions also are to be assumed to have occurred either at the beginning of that particular period or at the end of that particular period. This I will further explain you through one example. Now, you can note down this example. Let us say we are talking of a construction project or a construction company rather. Now, I am giving you detail of all the transactions that has been carried out by this particular company. For example, on April 5th, there is a receipt for running account bill number 9. You understand the running account bill? In construction industry, contractors normally submit their bills on a monthly basis, right? So, suppose for the first month he is submitting the bill, that he will be calling it as running account bill number 1. For the second month or the second bill, he will be calling it as running account bill number 2, right. So, in this particular example, on April 5th, the company has received a running account bill number 9, which is equivalent to 1,50,000, right. Second transaction is on April 10th, salary disbursement. That means whatever employees are working for the construction companies, they are being paid the salary, right, and this is amounting to rupees 80,000. On April 16th, the company has paid to the supplier of aggregates. Aggregates are the materials which you use it for producing concrete, right. So, for this the company has paid 20,000 rupees, right. It could be dollar, whatever currency you can feel, you can assume it, right. On April 21st, the payment for supply of stationery for office use has been made, and this is equivalent to rupees 5,000. On May 7th, receipt for running account bill number 10 is there, and it is equivalent to rupees 1,80,000, right. And on May 10th, again the salary has been disbursed for the staff working for the construction company, and it is equivalent to 80,000, right. You can do this problem in Ethiopian currency also, right. Process remains same, only thing the currency may change. That don't make much of a problem, right. Idea is we have to understand the basic philosophy in preparing the cash flow diagram, and two fundamental things for preparation of cash flow diagram is we have to note down all the transactions that has taken place during a particular period, and second thing that you have to understand is we are assuming that these transactions occur either at the beginning or at the end. Now, I am going to tell you about one more thing. In all our future lectures, we will be assuming that all the transactions are taking place at the end of a particular period. So, note down this. Our convention for this particular course is we are going to take all the transactions and we are going to assume that all these transactions occur at the end of a particular period, right. I will explain you through this example what do we mean by end of period occurrence, right. In some textbooks you will find they consider beginning of the period transactions also, but in our classes we are going to follow the end of period occurrences of different transactions, right. So, please make a note of it that our assumption is to go for end of period transactions, right. Okay, all of you have written down this, the slides have been copied. Yes, technology class, you have copied this slide. Please hurry up, you can note down this slide because this will be required for solving this problem. Right. Now, while on this slide itself, while you are copying it down, I will tell you what did we mean by the second assumption, that is end of transaction. Now, if you look at the transaction for April in this particular slide, we have a total of 4 transactions, right. We have a total of 4 transactions for the month of April. Is it clear? Yes. Now, out of these 4 transactions, in how many transactions we are getting the money into our pocket, or for how many transactions we have a incoming? For transaction number 1, because we are receiving 1,50,000, whereas for the remaining 3 in April, it is all outgoing. We are making either salary disbursement, or the payment for supply of aggregates, or the payment for supply of stationery, right. I hope now you must have copied all this slide, right. Okay, so we move to this example itself. In continuation to this previous slide, you can note down these 5 transactions also. On May 28th, please look at this slide. On May 28th, there has been a payment made for supply of cement. On May 28th, payment for supply of cement has been made, amounting to rupees 50,000. Then you have a receipt for running account bill number 11, equivalent to rupees 2,50,000. This is occurring on June 6th. On June 10th, again salary is disbursed, and this time it is rupees 80,000. On June 16th, we are paying for supply of structural steel. It is worth 1,100,000. And finally, on June 28th, we are making payment of rent of premises for July and August, that is 100,000, right. This June 28th transactions, you please note it down very carefully. It says payment of rent of premises for July and August, although that means it is basically an advance payment, right, and it is equivalent to 100,000. Now, suppose for all these transactions, we are supposed to make a cash flow diagram, right. So, very easily it can be done, right. I will tell you how to proceed with preparation of such cash flow diagram, in which you are given the information on different transactions carried out over a period of time, right. Now, I will go on telling you for each month separately, and then you will be able to make the complete cash flow diagram. For this, what I will do is, I will take a piece of paper and then I will tell you how to go about it. Now, just look at the diagram which I am making here. Let us say this is month April, APR, I write it for month April, right. Now, in April month, there are 4 transactions, right. Look at your notebook and just see, there are 4 transactions for the month of April. First one, we are getting a payment of 1,50,000. So, straight away I am putting it here, 150,000. Why I have put it in upward direction? Because I am receiving this money, it is incoming for me. So that's why I am writing it on plus side. In my convention, plus side is upward, minus side is downwards. Since 150,000 is being received by me in the month of April, I am writing it at the end of April. Now, even though this has taken place on 5th April, I am assuming that this is occurring on 30th of April. 30th April. Let's say this is May. This is 31st May. Then there could be June. 30th June. Right. Now you can see, just for explaining you, I am writing 30th April, last day of April, last day of May, last day of June. Right. But in real cash flow diagram, you will not be writing 30th, you will not be writing 31st, you will not be writing this. You will have to understand that on the cash flow diagram, April means it is end of April, that is 30th April. May means end of May, that is 31st May. June means 30th of June, right, last day of June, right. From here onwards, I am not going to write all these things, so I am cutting it out, right. But you have to understand that all these transactions represent end of period transactions, end of April, end of May, end of June, end of July, like this. Remember, because we are following the convention in which end of transactions are assumed, right. So, even though the first transaction we have received 150,000 on 5th April, we are assuming it that it has occurred on the last day of April. This is what the thing that you have to note, right. Now, April 10th, you have distributed the salaries, that is 80,000. So, even though it is on 10th April, I am showing it here 80,000 downward direction, because it is going from my pocket. Remember, I am making this cash flow diagram from organization point of view. So, how much money organization has received, how much money organization has paid, all are to be considered here, right. So, on the same way, you can carry out the balance operation for the month of April. There are few more transactions for April. For example, there is another transaction. You have made the payment of 20,000 for supply of aggregates. So, I have added another line, another arrow worth 20,000 in downward direction. And finally, you have a 5,000 value for payment for supply of stationery. Is it clear? So, at the end of April, we are assuming that we have received 150,000 and we have disbursed how much? 105,000. Is it clear, technology class? Fine. Now, in the same manner, can you draw it for May? For the month of May you draw, for the month of June you draw, and that will complete our cash flow diagram exercise for this problem, right. Now for the month of May it would be we have received a running account bill number 10 for 180,000. Salary disbursement has been made for 80,000. Payment for supply has been made for 50,000, and salary has been disbursed for, no, that's all. So for the month of May, is it clear? Okay, for the month of June, now I will draw. June 6th, I am going to I have received 2,50,000 and I am disbursing 80,000 here, another 100,000 and another 100,000, right? For the month of June also it is clear? Okay. Now remember all these things. Although for the month of June your transaction was carried out on 6th June, 10th June, 16th June and 28th June, what you are assuming? You are assuming that all these are taking place at the end of June. Is it clear? So this is our convention. We are assuming that irrespective of what date the transaction was carried out in a given period, we are assuming it to be happening on at the end of that particular period. This is the point that you have to understand very clearly. This is our convention that we are going to follow for this particular course. In some textbook you may find the other way round also, right? But please follow this convention only, whatever we have discussed right now. Clear? So whatever transaction we have carried out for this particular problem is shown on a composite diagram, which will look something like this, right? So can you complete this diagram? Can you complete this diagram? For the month of April, what would be the upside? 150,000. I am giving you the hint to complete this diagram. For the month of April, the upward direction arrow will have a value of 150,000. The downward arrow for the same month April, you show it 105,000, right? For the month of May, in the upward direction you have 180,000, right? For the month of May itself, in downward direction you have 130,000, 130. And for the month of June, in upward direction you have 2,50,000 or rather 250,000 in upward direction and 280,000 in downward direction. 280,000 in downward direction, right? All of you have completed this exercise? Now this is one way of showing the cash flow diagram for this particular problem, right? The same cash flow diagram I can show it like this also. Please have a look at this slide. This is month of April, May, June, right, 150,000 in upward direction and 105,000 in downward direction. So, resultant is 45,000 in upward direction, right. For the month of May, resultant is 50,000 in upward direction, plus sign. For the month of June, the resultant is 30,000 in June, in negative side. So, this is the cash flow diagram representation number 2. So, either you can show it like this. Is it clear how we have got this? Yes? So, either you can show it like this or the way it is shown here on your slide, this one, right. So, what I have done is, if the transactions are occurring at the same point, remember I have added all the plus side and subtracted it from the minus side. This is possible only when they are at the same point of time. Is it clear? For example, for the month of April, here we had 150,000 and here I had 105,000. Now, this is what I have subtracted, 150,000 minus 105,000. Now, this was possible because all these transactions were assumed to have occurred at the end of April. Is it clear? Now, this type of calculation, simple algebraic calculation, is not possible like this. I cannot simply add 45,000 here and 50,000 here. Why? Because this is taking place at the end of April and this is taking place at the end of May. So, this point also you please be very clear. Until and unless your transactions are at the same point of time, you simply cannot algebraically add or subtract them, right, because money has value over a period of time. So, this $100 is not equivalent to this $100. Let us say this is year 2, this is year 1. I cannot add them simply algebraically, but I can very well add a situation like this, in which I have $100 here and another $100 here. This I can simply add 100 plus 100, 200, but I cannot add this and this. Why? Because this is happening at period 1 and this is happening at period 2. Is this point clear to all of you? Yes. Fine. So, this was a simple example of preparing cash flow diagram when the information on cash flows are given to you, right. Now, there are two broad types of cash flow diagram that we will be finding in the problems that we are going to solve in future. You can note this slide. The first one is known as cost dominated cash flow diagram, right. Can we focus on the slides please? Cost dominated cash flow diagram here on the PPT. So, cost dominated cash flow diagram and revenue dominated cash flow diagram. Just look at this slide. whatever problem we are going to solve in future in construction economics, which requires the use of time value of money, will be broadly you will find that they come under three types of cash flow diagram. The first example is shown to you in your screen, that is called cost dominated cash flow diagram. What is the peculiar thing about this diagram? All the transactions that you see here are shown on the negative side, downward direction, which represents cost, right. For example, I can tell you a situation in which you are told that a company is buying an equipment for $5,000, right, and he has to pay $400 every quarter towards its repair and maintenance. If I give you this kind of problem, what you get? All information on cost aspect alone, nothing on the return. I have not told you about how much money you are going to get when you are operating this equipment. So, those type of situations are analyzed using cost dominated cash flow diagram. Is it clear? If you see the picture, it very clearly shows that there is nothing on the upper side, right. All the informations are contained in the negative direction. That means we are given all information only on the outgoing part, nothing on the incoming part, right. Now, we will move to another class of cash flow diagram, which is called revenue dominated cash flow diagram. Just see this picture now, it is just the reverse of it. Now, all the informations are provided only on the plus side. That means you are told only about the incomings, that means the return that you are going to get from a particular alternative. Nowhere it is mentioning about the cost aspect, expenditure aspect, expenses aspect. This problem is silent. So, whenever we face such type of problem, we will take help of revenue dominated cash flow diagram. There could be a simple illustration in which, if let us say somebody comes to you and says that by investing in this particular project, you are going to get a return of $1,000 in year 1, $2,000 in year 2 and $3,000 in year 3. Now, that person has not told you how much investment you have to put in this alternative, right. So, whenever you have got such kind of situation, you can use revenue dominated cash flow diagram, right. So, what two types we have studied just now? One was cost dominated cash flow diagram and the another one is revenue dominated cash flow diagram. Now, the third thing, it is not shown here, will be like this, which will have information on cost aspect as well as on return aspect. Something like this. Now, in this picture, what you find is that we have information for plus side also and for minus side also. For example, I tell you a problem in which it is said that if you are investing rupees $100,000, you are going to get a return of 50,000 or let us say $15,000 in the first year, $15,000 in the second year. Like this, some information would be given, and then you will also be told that you have to spend let us say about $10,000 for operation and maintenance. Maybe it could be per annum. So, what is the difference between this slide and the previous 2 slides. In this case, what you find is that we are given information not only on cost aspect, but revenue aspect also. So, maybe this kind of cash flow diagram you can term it as mixed kind of cash flow diagram, in which we are having information not only on cost part, but also on revenue part. So, all the 3 types of cash flow diagrams are clear to you, right? Yes. Cost dominated, revenue dominated and mixed one, right. Now, another thing which is interesting about this cash flow diagram is shown in this particular slide. The title of the slide, if you go through it, it says that cash flow diagram is dependent on the agency for whom it is prepared, right. This you could have easily guessed it, because suppose I am a lender, I will have a different cash flow diagram for the same transaction, whereas my borrower will have different kind of cash flow diagram for the same cash transaction. I give you this through a simple example. Suppose 1000 rupees has been lent by a lender to a borrower, and the borrower is supposed to pay him 300 rupees or $300 every year for next 5 years, right. Problem is simple. Let us say I am the lender and I have lent you 1000 rupees or $1000, right, and you as a borrower are supposed to return this amount in an installment of $300 or 300 rupees every year for next 5 years, right. Now, can you draw the cash flow diagram for the lenders and can you draw the cash flow diagram for the borrower? You will find that both are just the opposite of each other, right. For example, the first part of this diagram shows that the lender's cash flow diagram would show 1000 rupees or $1000 in negative side. Why? Because that $1000 is going out of his pocket, out of the pocket of lender. Now, same 1000 rupees is coming into the pocket of the borrower, right. So, you can easily find that this 1000 rupees is shown on the plus side, 1000 rupees is shown on the plus side for the borrower cash flow diagram. You can see similar treatment has been made for 300 rupees return every year for next 5 years, whereas in lender's cash flow diagram it is shown on the plus side, in the borrower's cash flow diagram it is shown on the negative side. Now, is the difference clear to you? That is why it is said that, clear? That is why it is said that cash flow diagram is dependent on the agency. Agency in this term are lender and borrower, right. So, or you can say stakeholder. So, cash flow diagram is dependent on the stakeholder for whom it is being prepared, right. Now, this was as far as simple cash flow diagram was concerned, right. Now, we will discuss about project cash flow, because remember this particular course is on construction economics and finance. So, basically we are mainly interested in understanding the construction project cash flow, right. Now, construction project cash flow is slightly difficult to make, because you have to gather so many information from different sources. I have listed out certain points in the bulleted form which govern the cash flow diagram as far as project is concerned. For example, for drawing a project cash flow diagram, first of all I will tell you what project cash flow diagram means. Basically, it is the pictorial representation of how much cash is incoming in the project and how much cash is going out of your project, right. So, that is what is called project cash flow diagram, right. Now, in a project situation, you will find that the main source of incoming for a contractor is the payment from the client. You understand who is a contractor, you understand who is a client, right. Client is the entity for whom the contractor is rendering his services, either in the form of a design or in the form of engineering or in the form of construction, right. So, the main source of incoming for a contracting organization is the payment through the client. Now, what are the sources of his outgoings? To whom is he paying? He is paying to his staff, he is paying to his labor, he is paying to his equipment supplier, he is paying to his material supplier, right. He is paying to his subcontractors, he is paying to his vendors. So, these are the situations in which he is disbursing his money. So, whatever he is transacting with these agencies, naturally they will go under negative side, and the money which he is receiving from the client, it could be in different form. Now, all these receipt of money will go in plus side. What kind of receipt are possible in case of a contracting organization? It could be in the form of a mobilization advance. You understand what is mobilization advance? Technology class. What is mobilization advance? I will tell you, it is very simple. Before starting any work, before starting any construction project, if the client is paying some money towards mobilization of staff, mobilization of manpower, mobilization of material, right, to the contractor, such money is known as mobilization advance. In most of the projects, you will find that, especially when the client is from private sector, you will find that there is a provision of mobilization advance. Normally, mobilization advance is about 5 to 10% of the total contract value, right. 5 to 10% of the total contract value normally is the mobilization advance. Now, these advances are paid to the contractor so that he can bring his men, he can bring his material, he can bring his machinery and start the work, right. Now, clients are not giving the mobilization advance just like that. They will normally have a provision in which they will charge certain interest for the mobilization advance that is paid to them. So, those advances are known as interest bearing mobilization advance. What they are called? They are called interest bearing mobilization advance. I will write it for you. They are called interest bearing mobilization advance. right? Sometimes mobilization advance could be free of any interest charges also. So, those are called free of charges, free of interest charges mobilization advance, right. But in government projects you won't find mobilization advance without bearing the implication of interest charges. So, government companies, government sector employers rather, they provide interest bearing mobilization advance, right. Then there are other forms of advances also. One is called equipment advance or plant and machinery advance, right. Now, in major projects you will find that if the project requires very specialized kind of equipment, for example, if it is a tunneling work and the contractor is supposed to mobilize tunnel boring machine TBM, in such cases some government clients, they can give equipment advance also, clear. So, those are called equipment advance. Then there is a term called secured advance. What is called secured advance? Now, secured advance is given for procurement of material, especially procurement of non-perishable materials, right. Now, normally the secured advance is given for a value of about 75% cost of the material. Suppose the material is going to cost you 100 rupees or $100, clients may pay you up to 75 rupees or $75. So, that is called secured advance. Now, there is a concept that these advances are paid to the contractors in lieu of bank guarantees. There is a term called bank guarantee, BG. So, whatever advance you are going to get from the clients ask for equivalent amount of bank guarantee. Suppose you have asked for a mobilization advance of $100,000, you will have to pay a bank guarantee of equivalent amount of $100,000. So, that is also in vogue these days, right. So, the contractor can get the payment in the form of mobilization advance, in the form of equipment advance, in the form of secured advance, right. So, these are the sources for his incomings, right. Now, the project cash flow will depend on, if you go through this slide, the project cash flow is dependent on the gross bill value and its time of submission. What happens in contract, in any construction contract, the contractor submits a cash flow statement. A cash flow statement is submitted by the contractor, in which he indicates that on such and such month he is going to bill this much amount of money. This information is derived based on the construction schedule that the contractor has prepared and it has been approved by the owner or the client, right. So, I have got the construction schedule with me. I know which activity I am going to perform in what month. I also know at what rate I am going to get paid from my client. So, it is not at all difficult to calculate the gross bill value for each of the months for the total duration of the project. Clear? How will I get? Suppose I have planned that I am going to do X amount of activity A in month 1. Now, I know my unit rate. So, unit rate multiplied by X amount for activity A will tell me how much money I am going to bill for that particular month as far as activity A is concerned. Similar set of calculation I will be able to do for all the activities scheduled to be performed in that particular month. Clear? Is it making sense to you? Technology class? Is it clear? Fine. Now, in addition to this gross bill value, you have to also understand the timing. That means, in which month you are going to get how much money from the client. For this, you have to go through the contract document and read the clause on terms of payment. When you sign the agreement between you and the client, you agree on certain terms of payment. Terms of payment means at what interval you are going to be paid, how much time the client organization is going to take to process your bill. In most of the cases, you will find that clients entertain a monthly billing. Monthly billing means every month at the end of it, contractor will be submitting the bill to the client. Now, client will go through that bill and then release the payment. Now, how much time the client will take to process the bill will be told to you as a contractor right at the beginning. So, they will tell you that I will take 3 to 4 weeks time to process your bill and give you the check. So, this difference in time between whenever you had submitted the bill and the time at which you are receiving the payment is called time lag. So, time lag is what? Suppose I have submitted the bill on 30th of June and I am going to receive the payment after 4 weeks. That means there is a time lag of 1 month. Now, this time lag, as we will see by solving some problem, is very important. Lower the time lag between your submission of bill and your receipt of bill, you will find that you are in a better position of cash management. So, such type of contractor for whom the time lag is very less will very rarely face the situation of liquidity. That means they will not be running out of cash, which is so very important to run your project on a day-to-day basis. Clear? So, that is what the first point says, that first and second point, for drawing the project cash flow, you have to be clear about the gross bill value and its time of submission and the time lag. The time lag part will be known to you by going through the tender document or the agreement copy that you have signed with the client, right. Then there is a term called retention money. There is a term called retention money. You understand this retention money? In some country, this is also known as retainage. You are familiar with this term? Okay. This retention money is kept with the owner so that the contractor does run away, right. So, this is basically a sort of guarantee that the contractor is going to complete the project and he is not going to run away from it, right. Nowadays, retainage or retention money is not kept in the form of liquid cash. Here also the contractors prefer giving equivalent amount of bank guarantee and then getting the total money back. So, what happens? Suppose 5% is the retention. What does this mean? 5% retention means from every bill, suppose the contractor has raised a bill of $100. So, from this bill the client organization will keep $5 with him. This is the meaning of retention. Now, what happens in some contract? Contractors enter into an agreement with the owner which says that don't keep any of my money with you, right. That means, if the bill value is for $100, pay me full $100, right, and $5 which you were supposed to keep as retention money, take that much bank guarantee from me, right. So, he will be able to give to the owner 5% equivalent amount of bank guarantee. Is it clear? So, this is as far as retention money is concerned. Then for drawing the cash flow diagram, you should also be having some information on the release of retention money. In most of the contract you will find that 50% of the retention money is released immediately after the completion of the project and remaining 50% is paid after the completion of defect liability period. What it is called? Defect liability period, DLP. Defect liability period. So, in most of the contract you will find that 50% of the amount is released to the contractor after virtual completion of the project and remaining 50% is paid to the contractor after the completion of defect liability period. You understand this defect liability period? Technology class? Defect liability period is basically that particular period up to which the contractor is supposed to rectify the mistakes or rectify the errors that has cropped up in the product that he has delivered, right. So, that is the idea of defect liability period. So, normally the 50% of the balance retention money is paid to the contractor after completion of defect liability period. What is the normal defect liability period specified in Ethiopian projects? Can you tell me? 1 year. Here also it varies between 1 year to 18 months. Very good. So, we are on similar line. Okay. Now, the project cash flow will depend on these factors also. The mobilization advance we have already discussed, the plant and equipment advance we have already discussed, material advance and the terms of their recovery. For example, the owner must have given you some mobilization advance. So, they will also specify from which running account bill onwards the recovery will start, because he has given you money in advance. Now, that money has to be recovered. So, in the contract they will also specify that from such and such running bill onwards your recovery would start, right. So, that is also very important. Similar thing is with equipment advance also, and same thing holds true for material advance also. So, not only you have to note the conditions on these things, mobilization advance, plant and equipment advance and material advance, but you have to also find the terms of their recovery from the contract document. Now, this was as far as inflow was concerned, right. Now, we will see some of the aspects governing outgoings or cost or cash outflow, right. So, for drawing the cash outflow diagram, we have to understand the details of cost incurred by the contractor for raising a particular bill value. Suppose the contractor has raised a bill amount of $100. So, naturally he must have spent some money for raising this $100. He must have spent on labor, he must have spent on material, he must have spent on subcontractors, he must have spent on plant and equipment, right. Otherwise, just out of the moon, just out of anything you can't raise $100 bill, because you must have done some work, and for doing that work you must have employed some labor, you must have consumed some material, you must have taken the services of some equipment, or else you must have utilized the services of some subcontractors. You understand subcontractor word? Subcontractor? Fine. So, these things are to be known in order to draw the cash outflow. Now, not only you must be knowing about these aspects, the cost, but the credit period. Here we are talking of credit period. For example, I have purchased some material today. Am I paying to the supplier today itself, or am I paying him after 1 month? Let us say I am paying the material supplier after 1 month. Then 1 month here is known as credit period, right. So, in industry, especially in construction industry, you will find that credit period varies between 4 weeks to 6 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks. What is the situation in Ethiopia there? How many weeks of credit period you get in construction? Yes, technology class please. Credit period for how many weeks? Suppose you have got the material today, after how many days you pay him? Okay. Here in India, for major contractors, they get a credit period of 4 to 6 weeks. But for labor, there is no credit period. That means labor, suppose you have got the work done for labor for this month, you have to pay him in this month itself, right. So, for labor cost computations, credit period to be taken is nil. but for material, but for equipment, the credit period to be considered is between 4 to 6 weeks. It means that if I am taking the services of, let us say, some equipment, then I need to pay that owner within between 4 to 6 weeks after the work is over. That is the credit period I am enjoying with that particular supplier. So, the more the credit period, the better it is for the contractor, right, in one way. But if credit period goes beyond a particular point, you will find that your vendor would start putting charges for financing that particular cost. So, then they will charge you from they will charge the financing portion also from you, and you may not be aware of that. So, it should neither be too long nor it should be too short. So, in construction you will find that in most of the countries the credit period goes between 4 to 6 weeks, right. But for labor normally no credit period, right, nil. Credit period is nil for labor. You can take for plant and equipment, for subcontractor and for material supplier between 4 to 6 weeks, right. Now, what I will do is, these are the background information that you should be having for understanding the cash flow, project cash flow, right. Now, what I will do is, in next lecture I will take up one small problem and then we will work it out. I will give you all the informations related to whatever point we have discussed, and I will tell you to solve the problem. Problem solving there means drawing the project cash flow diagram. Now, what is the utility of drawing this project cash flow diagram? That is one very important question that we need to answer. Why after all we are doing all such things and then coming up with a figure of project cash flow diagram? After all, what is it for? So, you will find that project cash flow diagrams are used for many purposes. First of all, in some projects it is a mandatory requirement. Your client should say to you that furnish the project cash flow diagram. Why they make it mandatory? Because until unless your client knows how much money they have to pay you at what point of time, how are they going to mobilize that fund? So, this is very, very important for fund planning, right. Suppose I am the owner for a project and you are the contractor. I must know in advance that okay, in month 1 I should be ready with $100,000, next month $100,000, next to next month $150,000. So, I must know them well in advance, then only I can think of how to mobilize this fund, how to give you that money. Do I have that much money with me in my bank account, or do I have to borrow? If I have to borrow, I have to give some time to my lender. So, that is one of the utilities of this project cash flow diagram. Then for a contractor, the project cash flow diagram is important because the contractor also needs to know at different point of time what are his inflows, what are his outflows, and what is the difference. Now, the difference of inflow and outflow, if it is in negative, that means this much money he has to arrange on his own, then only he can run the project, otherwise he is in a big soup, he can't run the project, he will have a liquidity problem. So, the contractor also needs to know what is the maximum fund requirement for him for a given period, right. So, for all these informations you need to draw the project cash flow diagram. Now, you will be surprised to note that these project cash flow diagrams are very useful for tendering stage also, right. Now, you will be surprised that at the tendering stage, when there are very few information available to the tenderer, how am I going to draw the cash flow? So, the experts say that even if you have got less information or very fuzzy kind of information available to you at the time of tendering, then also this exercise must be carried out, because this will tell you what is the financing cost that you are going to incur for running this project. So, this has got wide utilities, and that is why in most of the modern projects you will find that client organizations, they insist on furnishing the cash flow diagram from the contractor. And what for they are asking? Now, it should be very clear to you. So, I think I have given you enough background on cash flow as well as on project cash flow diagram. Now, from here onwards, in the next lecture, I will give you one problem, right, and we will be working out that problem right in the class itself, and then in addition to that problem, I will give you number of other problems also for your practice, right. So, I will just quickly summarize whatever we have discussed in this class. We have started with the cash flow diagram. There I have told you what cash flow means. Then we discussed with the help of a simple example how to draw the cash flow diagram, right. And then I told you different types of cash flow diagram, for example, cost dominated cash flow diagram, revenue dominated cash flow diagram, and mixed cash flow diagram. I also told you that cash flow diagrams are dependent on the perspective for whom it is being considered or the agency for whom it is being drawn, right. And then finally, towards the end of this lecture, we discussed salient features of project cash flow diagram. We discussed what kind of informations are required for drawing the project cash flow diagram, right. This is what lecture 3 consisted, and if you have got any doubt, you may please ask so. Yes, technology class, if you have got any doubt. Fine, thank you. Just an important announcement. Next class also will be on finance itself, and I will also be taking that class, right, but after 15 minutes of break, right. So, India time we will start at 6:30. बंद कर दिया ना।